Thank you V, Edroldorano, and Manarok for joining the channel. There are a lot of really popular builds I haven't done in Dark Souls, and one of them is the Painting Guardian Sword with the Dark Moon Blade. The main reason this build is so popular is how high the potential DPS is. The Painting Guardian Sword is the highest DPS weapon in the game. If you stand there and spam the R1 button while two-handing it, you'll get a bigger number than any other weapon in the game. On top of that, Dark Moon Blade is the highest AR weapon buff in the game, especially when you're rank 2 or 3 in the Blades of the Dark Moon Covenant. So, at least on paper, this will get you the highest DPS in the game, right? There are a couple issues with that line of thinking, such as actually getting that DPS takes a few swings, and a lot of the time when you're actually fighting bosses that need that DPS, like Manus, Calamite, or even Nito in the Four Kings, you simply won't have enough time to safely reach your DPS potential. On top of that, the Painting Guardian Sword has almost no reach since it's a curved sword, and it will bonk on enemies like the Armored Boars. On top of that, Dark Moon Blade has a single cast that only lasts 60 seconds, so while this build is incredible on paper and has a lot of potential, there are a lot of drawbacks that will make this run much harder than it needs to be. Either way, I suppose we should just get into it. Unfortunately, to get both elements of the build, we need to reach Anor Londo, and since I think I've been doing enough weird playthroughs of the game recently, I want this one to be pretty normal. I'm starting off with a Cleric because you need 30 Faith to even use Dark Moon Blade. We also need 20 Dexterity for the Painting Guardian Blade. In retrospect, there may have been a better class to start with, but starting as a Cleric will help with something else later on anyway. So we make our way through the Asylum and onto the run proper. The mace does pretty decent damage unupgraded and does a good amount of stagger damage, so it'll work well enough for now. I grabbed the gold pine resin from the chest in the Burg and made my way to the Tourist Demon. Someone mentioned on the Literally Nothing video that the auto caption said Tourist Demon, so I will be calling it that from now on. On the way in, I take out the Crystal Lizard. This will be important later. Instead of doing something crazy, like making it jump off the edge or whatever, I just climbed the ladder, took out the hollows, applied the resin, and plunging attack to the thing. From there, 3 R1s will stagger it, then 1 more will finish the job. I run past the Drake, same as ever, run through the parish, taking out the Greatsword Black Knight, which I don't normally do, but will be important, and get one of my favorite weapons. Unfortunately, I can't use it this run, but it's still important to take this guy out, as well as the Sword Black Knight back in the Burg. I grab the basement key, then sprint unimpeded straight to the parish bonfire. I do a little bit of farming to get the mace to +3, taking out the big guy in the process, and grabbing the Firekeeper soul, then make my way up to the gargoyles. I know I'm breezing past all this, but after going through what exactly I had to do to get through this with pretty much nothing twice, this feels pretty mundane in comparison. The gargoyles are no issue. I overestimated the mace's poise damage here, which ultimately leads to me replacing it before moving on too far, especially considering its lackluster damage even at this point, despite its performance on the Tourist Demon. Either way, ringing the first bell is no issue, and we slowly smash the hollows, blocking the doorway back into the church before booking it back down to Anjay, getting the mace to +5, and grabbing a bit of gear that will make the next portion of the run vastly easier. I run down to the Darkroot Garden to grab the Wolf Ring, one of the most powerful rings in the game if used properly. To get the ring, you run straight to the fog wall prior to the area with the stone knights leading to the butterfly, before turning right, killing the tree, then running down until you see a stone structure that leads straight to the ring. This ring trivializes the Capra Demon, and I highly recommend using it in every playthrough you do. From here, I run down into the basin, killing the Crystal Lizard on my way down, grab the Knight Armor next to the Hydra, and run up to Havel. I died because I forgot I had a talisman equipped and couldn't parry, but I came back and took my revenge, obtaining another one of the best rings in the game in the process. Next up on the docket is the Ring of Favor and Protection, which is obtained in the same way you would in pretty much every other playthrough, kicking Lautrec off the cliff. I decided to equip the Fab Ring and Havel's so I could equip 2 pieces of the Knight Armor when it probably would have been better to just put on the Wolf Ring, since that would have given me enough poise to not stagger from 2 dog bites instead of just 1, but oh well. The Fab Ring is pretty useful if you're not planning on using any specific rings, but otherwise it's pretty bad. Eventually I'll be using the Ring of the Sun's Firstborn, since Bellowing Dragon Crest doesn't work on miracles, as well as whatever I need at the time, from the Covenant of Artorias, the Orange Shard Ring, or usually the Wolf Ring. Until then, though, Havel's and the Wolf Ring will suffice. During your first jaunt through the lower Burg, you can actually kill 2 of the 3 thieves in the first set of buildings through the doors. The first 3 dogs can be lured into the fire in any number of attempts, and as long as you don't get too gung-ho, the rest of the place is manageable without any extra tricks. With this setup, I was able to take out the Capra Demon on my second try, only dying the first time because I was a little too eager to get up the stairs. As long as you kite the first dog around to the right of the Capra, it's easy enough to get up the stairs unscathed. From there, especially with poise, you can just take out the dogs with a couple attacks and have an easy one-on-one with the Capra. I took out the Capra essentially exclusively for the Large Ember, though we don't use it till later. I also probably should have got the Pyromancer for Power Within, but honestly I don't think it would have changed the DPS enough to matter, especially since it only lasts 60 seconds and would also require us to heal more. On my way down to Quelaag, I remembered the Astora Straight Sword, which is actually useful for this run. It's a pretty bad weapon most of the time. Its damage is really low for a unique weapon, especially since it can't be buffed, but it'll be nice to have a +5 without using any more materials that I could use for the Painting Guardian Sword, and it scales. Poorly, but it still scales with Faith, which I'm actually leveling in this run. So I pick it up, run back to Andre, and use all the Twinkling Titanite I've been picking up from the Crystal Lizards to get the sword to +3. I also take a stop at the Undead Asylum real quick since I'm going to need the doll and the Titanite slab anyway, and it'll let me trade for a few more Twinkling Titanite so I can get the sword to +4. The Torch Hollows are as scary as ever, but still not the worst thing in the game. I use the Bandit's Knife I got as a lucky drop to take out the Stray Demon since it's so weak to bleed, take out the Black Knight in front of the doll, then bone all the way back to Andre. After upgrading, it's finally time to take on Quelaag. The back way through Blighttown is as easy as ever, and since I can actually heal, I don't even worry about having a Moss at this point. The sword isn't good, even while two-handing I'm only doing 87 damage a hit. I'm still baffled that the dragon form does so much, but this is still pretty bad. Luckily I fought Quelaag enough that this damage isn't an issue. I also run down and take out Ceaseless via lore after ringing the bell so I can get more souls to level up and actually use what I want when I get the stuff for the build. I'll have the gold hem set equipped for the rest of this run. Its resistances are crazy good for its weight, and it's probably one of the best armor sets in the game just for that. It's time for Sens, but at this point it should be pretty easy to get through. Running past pretty much everything is super easy. I stopped to grab the large Titanite in the chest behind the first Snake Sorcerer, the shiny on the ground in the Giant's Blast Zone, and buy a couple from Tarkus for later. I meant to grab the gold Serpent Ring, but I genuinely just forgot, and it didn't end up mattering, so whatever. I become a victim of a strange hitbox, but aside from that, the Iron Golem fight was nothing crazy. I wasn't able to knock it off the first time, but the damage was enough that this fight didn't last too horrendously long, and the Golem isn't exactly the hardest boss anyway. I do something I don't normally, and begin killing the Painting Guardians on the rafters. It's usually easy to run past them, but I want their sword, so I'm going to do as much as I can. Unfortunately, I don't get it quite yet, so I bring down the elevator, take out the Sagat Gargoyle, bring the elevator down again, and make my way down to Gwendolyn's antechamber. Now, the keen among you will recognize that I didn't grab the ring I need to get rid of the statue down here. I forgot. So instead, I'm just going to use a glitch to get rid of it. You can just jump at the statue and quit out before the rolling animation stops. The animation that plays when you reload the character will get rid of it for reasons Illusory Wall covers in his object health video. I pop 10 humanity for the drop chance increase and do 3 full rounds of clearing out all the guardians here before I finally get the sword drop. And then I make my way into the Painted World. I need a souvenir of reprisal from here. Technically I need 80, but I am not farming 80, so I'll just dupe them with Andre. You can run through up until you reach the dragon, then enter the nearby tower to find 2 crow demons. It's easy enough to push them off the stairs to their deaths if they don't do it for you, and eventually one of them will drop one. It's a 6% chance, 12% with 10 humanity, but I swear this always takes longer than it should. Either way, we have all the components we need for our build, and make our way past the dragon with the animation reset glitch and spare Priscilla, since we can't do all bosses in this run, with Gwendolyn being required to even use the Dark Moon Blade. I really like Priscilla, she's cute. I'm going to take out Ornstein and Smoke before upgrading the Painting Guardian Sword since I really don't want to walk all the way back down to Andre and then all the way back. I head to the Giant Blacksmith to get enough Twinkling Titanite for a +5 sword, forget the Titanite chunk just outside that I'll come back for, and get into the fight. It's easy, as it usually is once you have enough time in the game, though slightly harder with such a poor weapon. It's so strange having a max level weapon and doing so little damage. There were a couple close calls in the fight because I underestimated Smo's range, but regardless. Now we can finally put our build together. Andre lets us upgrade our Painting Guardian Sword to +10 with the large Ember and all the Titanite and large Titanite shards we've been gathering, and I use some intentional game mechanics to get 99 souvenirs. Taking them back to Gwendolyn lets us the main source of our damage and the Dark Moon Catalyst to use it with. Before testing our damage on anything, I run down to Darkroot Basin and grab the Grasscrest Shield for the stamina regen. The damage on the Halberd Knight and even the Ints is way better than I expected, but I suppose that's what happens when you use the highest DPS weapon in the game. Since we're here, we might as well test our damage on the Butterfly. Being such an early game boss, we take it out in one cycle, but I really was not expecting only 6 hits. That damage is genuinely insane, especially considering how quickly those hits come out. I decided for no reason in particular that I didn't want to buy the Crest of Artorias, and decided to try my hand at the Hydra. The final hit is always just barely out of reach, and that's doubly true for this weapon, so I guess we'll just have to come back with something else we can supplement this part of the fight with. In that case, since we need the very large Ember anyway, I suppose it's time to do Nulando. I grab the second and final Firekeeper soul I ended up using in this run, make my way to the composite bow, kill Ingward, lower the water, grab a Titanite chunk behind an illusory wall, then grab the Ember and make my way back to Andre. I forgot about the chunks from the Giants and Sins, so I go ahead and grab those real quick, as well as the one by the Giant Blacksmith, before finally maxing out the Painting Guardian Blade. With the help of the bow, the Hydra is no problem, and we can free Dusk while we're here. I usually do this after clearing out the rest of the game, but it's a lot less tedious when you're doing it as you're playing through the game. Before climbing the ladder and having to deal with the cats, I decided to bail and just go buy the crest from Andre. From there, it's easy to sprint to Sif, grab the Hornet Ring, and take her out in 9 hits. Despite the drawbacks I mentioned earlier, this damage is pretty insane. That was easily the quickest Sif fight I've ever had. Granted, I usually fight her super early with the bandit's knife, but I digress. I was expecting to have trouble with her since she jumps around so much, but her attacks left plenty of time to stack up damage. From there, getting to the 4 Kings is easy since we've already drained New Londo, and the 4 Kings themselves are super easy, especially after last time where I had to kill them hitless. I was even able to take them out in 3 Kings because of how crazy the damage is, despite my extremely sloppy playing and neglecting to even use the enchantment for the first King, and the second spawning before it was even dead. I decided to go to Lost Izalith next, since I wanted to see how the damage fell on the Demon Fire Sage and the Centipede Demon, the 2 easiest fights left. I grabbed the red tier stone ring at this point, but I never actually ended up using it. It wasn't really necessary with our damage. With Cesos already dead, sprinting through the demon ruins, including taking out the first Capra Demon and even the Worm, which I never do with melee, is super easy. The Demon Fire Sage poses 0 threat, even compared to the Stray. It was so fun to take it down in only 9 hits. The Fire Sage is super weak to bleed, and the Painting Guardian Sword does do some bleed damage. Otherwise, it would have been closer to 15-ish, probably. Still ridiculous damage, though. The Centipede Demon is easy enough once you learn you can basically skip it throwing its arm at you a dozen times if you just stand in the corner, and from there it takes 9 hits to kill it. What's with all these bosses taking exactly 9 hits? Weird. Anyway, next up is the Bed of Chaos, with a slight detour for the Sunlight Maggot, and it's incredibly easy. I do like the Bed of Chaos, it's not annoying once you understand how it moves, and it's a fun gimmick. I've just done it too many times. Getting to the right is easy, then you just quit out, run to the left, and shoot the bow from the ledge that makes you invulnerable to all but Firestorm and the weird super rare meteor attack, and then roll through the fingers before running straight to the middle and taking out the bug. The bed actually used Firestorm twice in this fight, which I don't think I've ever seen before. Next up is Nido, which is why I did the Bed of Chaos beforehand. The catacombs are easy if you just take the shortcut down, as you always should unless you specifically want something from the catacombs. The first Necromancer by the bonfire goes down super fast too, so that's not an issue at all. Getting past the bone wheels is a little spooky like always, but not hard as long as you pay attention. I was really excited to see what would happen to Pinwheel, and I'll just let you witness it. 3 hits is really funny. Anyway, Tomb of the Giants. I killed Patches for fun, even though a spear attack comes out stupid fast. After going through this place blind, this casual run is nothing. I did accidentally reach the second bonfire, and I genuinely could never remember where exactly it was until I ended up finding it accidentally in this run. I'll probably actually start using it from now on just because I actually remember its location. Nido himself is really annoying if you don't use poise, so, as usual, wolf ring it up and take him down. The skeletons are a little scary since we can't just focus Nido like every other boss. Regardless, the fight is easy enough. The gold hem set made it impossible to be toxic, and the bleed resistance didn't hurt. Doing this fight without healing really makes you appreciate how truly accessible this game is. There's a lot of talk about difficulty options as accessibility, but there's so much more to it than that, you know? I don't think I have much of a place in that conversation, beyond saying a difficulty selection would have prevented the whole overcoming challenges thing that this game really strives at, for me specifically. I took a detour here to fight the Gaping Dragon. It died in 7 hits. I was really tempted to just not mention the Duke's Archives at all because I thought it would be funny, but I probably should for a couple of reasons. First of all, the boars are the hardest enemy in this run by far, since all of our attacks aside from the jump attack just bounce off of it. Besides that though, most of this place was pretty easy. I grabbed the pendant for later, sprinted up to our death, and did my best to not get cursed. Luckily I avoided it. The gold hem set does have really good curse resistance, but it isn't necessary. I wanted to skip the prison sequence, but decided I would rather get the Firekeeper soul. I didn't grab it, but that was my reason to not skip the sequence. The Pasakas weren't a threat despite using melee because they died in 2 hits, and the Man-Serpents died too quickly to cause any trouble. On my way to Seath, I was able to kill a Channeler without it teleporting away, which I don't think I've ever done before. I honestly didn't think that was even possible. After sprinting down to the Crystal Caverns, a clam got into the boss arena and genuinely posed more of a threat than Seath. To be fair, it's hard to pose 0 threat anyway, but still. I killed Seath in 13 one-handed hits. It's time for the DLC, which is the hardest part of this run by far because everything there is insanely resistant to all kinds of magic. Granted, hardest doesn't specifically mean hard, just harder than what came before. The Sanctuary Guardian is probably easier than a few base game bosses, aside from its resistances, for example. It started with lightning when it was really close to me, which I don't think I've ever seen, so I was caught way off guard. Aside from that though, the fight went pretty smooth. Not as smooth as the Nothing fight, but I was playing pretty poorly through this entire run. We can easily weave in attacks in a lot of places thanks to the speed of the weapon. The only issue is making sure we're close enough that those hits actually land. The 4-hit combo, the slam, the dive, the headbutt, and the wave all offer plenty of time to retaliate. This is the easiest DLC fight by far, and it's over quickly enough that it's not worth going in depth on. I freed Grix before the Artorias fight because I wanted the lingering Dragon Crest ring, but I think you need a certain amount of intelligence for that, so I wasn't able to get it. It wouldn't have been very helpful at this point given the boss's resistances, but still. Anyway, getting to Artorias is easy. We can, surprisingly, knock him out of buffing with only 3 hits, and at this point it's just a normal fight. The buff definitely won't last the whole fight, but again, that's not super important. You really can't capitalize on the DPS of this weapon on any fight in the DLC, but especially here. You get 1, maybe 2 hits, then you have to dodge. You can't drain a stamina bar spamming attacks like you can with most of the base game bosses, which really makes this weapon worthless for this fight, despite its use elsewhere. Either way, the other 2 bosses will wait. Getting through the DLC is easy as long as you kill a few specific enemies, like the bloatheads on the bridge with the sorcerer at the end, or make sure you plunge on the one in the elevator. Getting the key requires killing a mimic, but at this point it should be pretty obvious that it won't offer any resistance. Calamite has always been one of my favorite bosses in the series, so the only real issues it offers is when it doesn't go as far back as it should before using its fire breath because it hits a wall and failing to distinguish between the calamity grab and the fire breath. Usually rolling to the side works for both, but I did end up getting tinnitus in my first attempt. Calamite is a great example of why this build really isn't that good. It's highly resistant to our magic, and it moves way too much for us to actually be able to make use of our attack speed. It's still just Calamite, so it's not a crazy hard fight or anything, just be prepared to be fighting for longer than any other boss in the game. Finally, it's time for Manus. Initially I was just going to throw on the Havel armor and poise dink him, but my vigor is level 25, so that didn't really work. Looking back, I actually think this was my very first time ever fighting him without poise dinking. Well, aside from a few attempts back in my very first playthrough. I've never really liked the Manus fight, but after this, I really don't like him, and I don't understand why others do. Before explaining why though, I want to point out that I saw an evil vagrant next to the sorcerer before the bridge that leads down to Manus. This is the first vagrant, let alone red phantom evil vagrant, I've ever caught on camera. I didn't kill it because I just wanted to fight Manus, but it did end up hitting me with its spikes, so that's pretty cool I guess. Anyway, Manus sucks. First of all, he has a few attacks that are vastly harder to dodge if you don't grab an obscure item that you have to know to use during those specific attacks. The shotgun blast is almost impossible to dodge without the silver pendant, actually. His jump attacks have a wacky hitbox and track way too much, on top of hurting you as he's in the air instead of just when he lands, which is very unprecedented for this game. His weird combo is super janky. You'll take more damage if you get hit by the second swing than the first, which makes no sense, but sometimes you'll just take almost no damage from it at all. People complain about Elden Ring attack delays, but this was the original source of that. The attack where he raises his hand and slams it straight down is way too delayed. He also has some weird follow-ups that don't always happen, which is always annoying. Manus does display a lot of design decisions that would be significantly more common in Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, even Bloodborne to an extent, which might be why people like him so much, but I just really don't like this fight. I'm pretty sure this is all learnable, and I'm sure I will eventually, but either way, he has the same issues as Calamite for this build specifically, so this fight is even more annoying. Anyway, he is very possible, and we can finally wake up Dusk and move on to the final boss. I forgot to apply the buff before entering the arena, so I get hit by the jump slash, but after that, 3 parries with the Hornet Ring and Sun's Firstborn, then 3 slashes take Gwen out super easily and quickly. I felt that it was fitting to link the fire because of our Covenant, even though I never get this ending. I'm not really sure why I decided to do this run. I did the build because I wanted footage for my Gwendolyn video essay, but this video specifically was just kind of for fun. I'm not sure, but I had fun. This build is definitely worth trying. It has some shortcomings, but when it works really well. I want to try some more builds, like the Demon Great Axe, which has the highest AR in this game. Runs don't need to be exclusively hard, and this is a great example of that. I would love any recommendations too, so feel free to offer whatever builds or challenge runs you'd like to see me do in the future. Just please avoid the "without playing the game" or "with your eyes closed" jokes. It's not original, I promise. Thank you Emily and Ryan for being channel members. I figured shouting out new members at the beginning of the video and then returning ones at the end works well enough for now, but if you think something else would fit better, I'm all ears. I'm still new to this whole thing. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, I love you all, and I don't know how to end this.